Marketplace is supported by Raymond James, tailored wealth management, banking, and capital markets solutions for clients' unique needs. Learn more at raymondjames.com.
No new relief deal for this economy today, or as we like to call it around here, Wednesday. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance, comparing car insurance rates from multiple insurers so shoppers can evaluate options in one place. Now that's Progressive. Comparisons available at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. And by Twilio, a customer engagement platform used by millions of developers to reinvent how businesses communicate with their users. Learn more at Twilio.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Ryssdal. Wednesday today, the 30th of September, last day of the month. Good as always to have you along, everybody. I kind of gave away the lead already, right? House Democrats and negotiators from the White House agreed to not agree on a new relief bill today. Senate Republicans weren't really in those talks at all. Everybody is about to head home for the last push of the campaign, which leaves us with this. Disney yesterday announcing 28,000 people would be let go. Royal Dutch Shell said this morning 9,000 layoffs worldwide. Tomorrow is the 1st of October, which means airlines are looking at mass layoffs, as we've been telling you. And so the help is where? Marketplace's Andy Euler gets us going.
At about 2 in the afternoon yesterday, Inez Guzman says she got an email from her employer. She's a housekeeper at the Disneyland Hotel.
Well, it pretty much just told us that, they were going to lay off 28,000 people.
She's been furloughed since March 13th, which means up till now, Disney's been paying for health insurance and she's been collecting unemployment. But she's worried that if her job is gone, what's she going to do?
We could barely pay our bills, and I'm a family of 7, and I'm barely making it.
Jim Sullivan studies poverty and teaches economics at the University of Notre Dame. He says Congress seems to be banking on the labor market recovering somehow and quickly, but that could be wishful thinking.
If the labor market doesn't improve significantly over the next few months and unemployment rates remain as high as they are, which is much higher than they were at the beginning of the year, we're going to surely see poverty continue to rise.
He says current data is already showing that many families are struggling to get enough to eat, much less pay their bills. Heidi Shearholtz of the Economic Policy Institute says it's ultimately up to Congress to step in and help.
If it doesn't, this will go down as one of the biggest unforced errors in the economy that I've ever seen. And it will mean the working people, the working families of this country will just suffer enormously and needlessly.
She says the Fed is doing what it can to incentivize Americans to spend. But what families really need is more relief money. I'm Andy Euler for Marketplace.
This has been a year of superlatives in this economy, mostly to the downside. Yes, the worst short-term unemployment numbers ever, generationally bad long-term joblessness, the biggest economic collapse in 90 years. I'm sure you remember. Not everywhere, though, has it been bad. The summer of 2020 was the busiest for mergers and acquisitions in decades, more than $1 trillion globally in the third quarter, after an honestly lousy first half of the year because of the virus. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab breaks down the corporate rush to buy and sell.
You've heard all the cliches. The bigger, the better. Strength in numbers. Go big or go home. In a pandemic, cliches may not be so bad.
Moving in times of turbulence like this, company strategies need to change.
Steve Morissette teaches mergers and acquisitions at the University of Chicago. He says right now, smaller companies need access to bigger corporations' cash, and corporations can get better value.
So maybe we avoid done deals and we avoid overpaying during a recession.
A recession can also shift what kinds of deals are made. Corporations see value in diversifying their portfolios, which usually means buying brands that complement their existing business. But think about Walmart's bid to buy part of TikTok. That would make a very diverse portfolio. Ashish Ramchandran at Deloitte says big companies can make fundamental shifts when the market swings.
There are companies that have got a sound strategy behind the scenes. They are looking and waiting where they can step in and make a deal.
Meanwhile, some corporations are pulling back from diversifying geographically. Last quarter, international deals fell.
So, how do you go verify if a factory is actually capable of scaling up production in Asia when you cannot actually do a site visit?
Plus, the pandemic has disrupted global supply chains. Miles Shaver teaches strategic management at the University of Minnesota.
But once you've made those investments and your supply chain is built through China, if something happens there, then that's actually a risky thing.
Shaver says companies with the smartest strategies are using M&A deals to get ahead of the pandemic and look at how business will look once it's over. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
If you saw the debate last night, you might have caught an economic question or two. Would have been tricky given the president's behavior, but Chris Wallace did ask about the economic recovery. The Trump administration maintains it is going to be V-shaped. Former Vice President Biden expects it's going to be K-shaped. Marketplace's Mariel Segarra is on the economic alphabet beat today.
When you're a kid, you learn the alphabet song. It's just a device to help you remember your letters. That was Patti LaBelle on Sesame Street. This is kind of what economists are doing with the V-shape, K-shape thing. They're using the alphabet as a device to explain how we bounce back from recessions.
It's sort of a catchy and almost cute way of summarizing a very complex situation.
That's economist Seth Carpenter at UBS. Think of it this way. If you charted out U.S. GDP growth over time, what shape would you see? If it's a V-shape, economic growth fell fast and hard, but then bounced back just as fast. There's also the U-shape,
where things fall and then they take a long time at a low level before starting to recover.
The W shape, up and down, the L shape, the J shape, and the K shape. You know, one leg up, one leg down. Eric Lund is an economist at the Conference Board.
The K is more nuanced. It's not talking about just headline GDP growth. It's talking about how different groups inside of the economy are recovering.
The term seems to have cropped up in response to this recession, because certain industries, like restaurants, have been hit way harder than others. So have certain people. Lund says you could have a recovery that's V or J-shaped and K-shaped, where the data shows the broader economy bouncing back, but large groups being left out. I'm Mariel Segarra for Marketplace.
There is some good news to share. The government is not going to shut down at midnight, which is, of course, the end of the fiscal year. Congress and the White House have come to terms on a deal that will last through December 11th, which means we'll get to do their whole shutdown thing all over again. End of the quarter on Wall Street today. Traders are pretty happy. Details, numbers when we get there. No small part of finding our way through this pandemic is about the logistics of it. Shopping safely and how to do that. Working from home and all that entails. And schooling the kids. That last one has given rise to something called the Learning Pod, sort of a virus-safe educational and childcare cooperative. Of course, that is a bit too pat because, as Marketplace's Eric Barris reports, getting a pod together can be complicated and expensive.
Nanika Shah is forming an Afrocentric Montessori learning pod for her 2-year-old son and 4 other preschoolers.
I told people I started a pod and people think it's like, oh, it's so easy. It's actually not that easy.
Shaw's had to hire a teacher and deck out a space in her sister's small business in Brooklyn. Now she's dealing with all kinds of details.
From the larger things, such as the space, to even something as small as figuring out, like, what water coolers are we going to use? Like, it takes a lot of energy and time.
She's written contracts for the teacher with the other parents. She's checked zoning laws and added extra insurance to her homeowner's policy.
So you want to make sure that things are just done accurately. So I definitely took some time to just think about everything.
Doing things accurately is second nature to Shaw. She's an attorney. But these types of regulations may not be on other parents' minds, says Adam Scales with the Rutgers Center for Risk and Responsibility, especially for learning pods that employ someone and operate out of homes. One example, to run a business out of your home, you need a rider on your homeowner's insurance.
So if you're running a landscaping business, that's one rate. If you are selling products out of your house, that's a different type of policy.
Learning pods are comparable to daycare centers. Policies for those in homes run a few hundred extra dollars a year to more than $1,000. Scales says renting a pod out of your home could result in a lawsuit, and probably not because of COVID-19.
Someone slips and falls. Maybe one child pushes another. Maybe someone gets into the kitchen and gets burned there.
Insurance, contracts, paying a private teacher tens of thousands of dollars, outfitting a space. The cost just compounds, says LaRue Lewis McCoy, professor of sociology and education at NYU.
And unless you have a lot of discretionary income, what that means is that families are pushed out, or families are forced to make decisions where they say, we're going to do this without the insurance. We're going to bend around the rule.
And the rules can be confusing. For example, your home may not be zoned for a learning pod. In fact, says Adam Scales from Rutgers,
I am sure that most of these pods are violating local zoning ordinances.
Because laws vary from municipality to municipality. Punishments can range from a fine to imprisonment. And Scales says if a pod gets insurance, but not a zoning variance, the policy won't be valid. I'm Erica Barris for Marketplace.
They're getting less attention than they did a number of months ago, but protests against racial injustice in this country are still happening, and with them, a continued push to buy from black-owned businesses. Back in June, we talked to Rita Magaldi. She's in Draper, Utah. We asked her about what it was like to find her baklava bakery, Shir Ambrosia it's called, on a list of black-owned businesses that people could support. Orders, of course, went way up, so 3 months later, we've gotten her back on the phone.
My business is amazing. Financially, it's night and day from where it was at the beginning of COVID. I really feel like I have a thriving business now. So for a long time, for years now, I've wanted to have pictures taken of my baklava, but I haven't been able to really afford to hire a really nice food photographer because they are not cheap. And now I can now afford to hire a photographer. So we decided to do 2 photographs a week until they were all done. I have 12 flavors and 12 months of the year. And so I thought, oh my gosh, how awesome would that be if I can turn these photographs into something more useful than just photographs themselves? Let's create a calendar. This is another way for me to make a little extra money, and I'm calling it my house fund. So hopefully that when my lease is up next June, I'll be able to move out of my rental and move into a house again. Part of the reason why I started Shir Ambrosia, of course, it was because it's my passion, cooking and baking and making food look beautiful. But it also allowed me to be present and be there for my children and to be able to pick them up from school at 3 o'clock. You know, my kids might be older, but I want to always have a home for them to come to. And in order for me to do that, I have to work. And if that means I have to work 2 jobs, I'm going to work 2 jobs. Right now, it's continuing to raise them, make sure they're happy and healthy, and raise this 3rd child I have, which is my business. Buy my house, and then we'll see what happens after that.
That was Rita Magaldi. She's the owner of Shir Ambrosia Bakery in Draper, Utah. Tell us your story, would you? You can do that at marketplace.org/myeconomy. Coming up.
When you watch that little car move towards you in the city, it looks like the city is blissfully free of traffic.
Yeah, looks like it. First, though, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 329 points today, about 1.2%, 27,781. The NASDAQ up 82 points, about 0.7%, 11,167. The S&P 500 up 27 points, 0.8%, 33 and 63. As I said, last day of the month, last day of the quarter. So let's see how things did for that period, huh? In September, all three were down. Dow Industrials down 2.3%, NASDAQ off 5.2%, S&P 500 down 3.9%. For the quarter, though, better picture. All three indices up significantly. Disney, as we told you about, laying off 27,000 people. Disney down 28,000 people, rather. Disney down 1% today. Bond prices also down. Yield on the 10-year T-note, 0.68%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by WeWork. Today takes new ways of working, new measures toward health and safety, dedicated to flexible terms and purposefully designed spaces. See what's ahead for WeWork at we.co/future. And by Parametric. In a world where investors seek customized solutions, Parametric partners with financial advisors to create portfolios tailored to client goals and make passive investing personal. Parametric, custom to the core. More at customtothecore.com. And by Destination Medical Center, located in the heart of Rochester, Minnesota, a public-private economic development initiative offering an inspiring hub for growth and innovation. Learn more online at dmc.mn.
Support for WNYC comes from Facebook. To prepare for the U.S. elections, Facebook has tripled its safety and security teams, implemented 5-step ad verification, and launched a new voting information center. More at fb.com/about/elections.
On the next Brian Lair Show, we continue our election series, 30 issues in 30 days, with issue 9, the future of the planet and the future of fossil fuels, with Trump and Biden climate change debate excerpts and more. Also, as New York now has 20 hotspot zip codes, are nursing homes more prepared for a second COVID wave than they were for the first? The Brian Lair Show at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace here on WNYC. Stay with us for All Things Considered. That continues at 7 o'clock. Mostly clear skies tonight, a low of 58 degrees, and tomorrow, mostly sunny skies, warm, a high of 77.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. About 7 miles southwest of Marketplace World Headquarters here in downtown Los Angeles, there's a neighborhood called Lemert Park. It's an historically black part of town with a little park plaza, a shopping district along Degnan Boulevard known as Lemert Park Village. There are restaurants and retail, performing arts as well.
Lemert Park is famous for just musicians just playing together on the sidewalk.
That's
Mike the Barber. They call me Mike the Barber.
You can find him at the barbershop, where business has been, well,
slower than a wet turd sliding off a dry rock. Edit that out, but it's slow.
Too good to edit, right? Down the south end of Degnan, near a group of guys playing basketball, is where I meet Salita Reynolds. Hi.
Hi.
Elbow bump?
I'm Salita.
There we go. I'm Kai. Nice to see you. How are you?
Nice to see you, too.
She's the general manager of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, which does parking enforcement, bike lanes, crosswalks, taxis, couple of bus systems, and traffic planning for 7,500 miles of streets in a city famous for transportation problems. Tell me what you were just doing over there.
Well, this actually right here is a project of ours called People Street, where we take streets that were open to cars and we close them to cars and open them to people. And here, actually, this design, these polka dots on the ground, have West African art symbols in them.
Oh, that's cool.
That were put together with the community. So they're community-driven projects. And I hadn't been out to see it in a while, so I was just asking him if he plays here every day, like how's the community using it? And lo and behold, they are.
They are, which is cool.
Yeah.
Well, so this street is interesting because it's a major thoroughfare, right? It's a main drag of this part of town, stores and shops, and yet part of it is blocked off. Tell me what's going on there as you think about using streets in this town differently.
So not everybody thinks about it this way, but streets are actually public space. They're just like parks or anything else that we who, live in a city, we own them. And when we have sort of a huge moment like the one we're living through now, where, small businesses make up everything about the city that we love, and we could see that they were all struggling. So we decided it was time to think differently about how we use that public space. And instead of using it to store cars, could we use it for restaurants to set up tables, for stores to sell to customers, but there's still cars, open to cars going through.
Yep.
So we have to make sure that people are protected and safe.
Well, I would point out, actually, we're standing literally in the middle of the street talking to the woman who runs transportation in Los Angeles. So we're going to move.
We are. I'm a professional, though.
Yeah,
So
you are. You're a trained professional, so it's safe, right? So let's go to this side. And as we walk down Degnan Boulevard, I want you to tell me how you thought of recreating this space to let businesses thrive and yet let traffic and transportation go as well.
Sure. What we did is we actually opened up an application portal and did a lot of outreach to businesses around the city and said, come tell us if you want to use your space differently. If instead of using it for parking, you want to use it for your customers, let us know.
Right.
So we have now about 2,000 businesses around the city that have applied for and received permission to either have sidewalk dining, dining in private parking lots, or projects like this. And here, the businesses actually all got together and said, we want to do something along the entire block. So we were able to put out these barriers here.
Yeah, they're the big water-filled plastic things,
Yep.
3 feet high, 5 feet long, whatever.
There's still parking across the street, and there's still 2 lanes of traffic open, but the traffic on this street moves relatively slowly, so it's actually a great place for something like this.
So let me ask you, the post-pandemic, because we're eventually going to get there, one hopes. Is this kind of thing going to keep going, or are we going to keep thinking about transportation this way in Los Angeles and also in other cities? I mean, you see New York with some of those streets in Manhattan being blocked off.
Yes. I sure hope so, because, these streets, if you add them all up, they make up about 20%, 15 to 20% of the public land that we have in a city. If you ran a business and you didn't update the way that you used your assets for 50 or 60 years, you'd probably be out of business.
Yeah.
Projects like this, I think, allow us to get more out of a space that maybe isn't used in the best way. And so my big challenge now is, how do I make this permanent? What we see here, these sort of water-filled barriers, these are good on short notice, with, not a lot of, where we're sort of,
They're not the best looking thing in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
How can we raise the level of design and make them beautiful?
So think 5 years out for me. I mean, if you are able to keep this kind of thing going with better design and more buy-in, that's a seismic change in how we think about transportation and streets in this city and probably many others.
Streets, how we think about streets, how we think about work, how we think about the role of transportation in advancing some of our racial and socioeconomic equity goals. All of these things are things that, my colleagues and I and the sort of transportation commissioners around the U.S. are talking about and thinking about. Now, how can we set the table for some of those more positive changes to stick, while we know that at the same time, the amount of venture capital that continues to get poured into private mobility solutions continues unabated, and that's not necessarily a good outcome for transportation.
Let me ask you, actually, since you brought it up, the mobility industry question, and also micro-mobility, as long as we're on it, right? Uber, Lyft, and all of those, and the food delivery services, but also Lime and Bird. As you think about how transportation is changing, and I'm gonna stipulate here that this pandemic has changed transportation forever, right? Do you buy that, by the way?
I do.
Okay, all right. And you're the expert, so I'm gonna go with my gut here.
For a nickel, Kai. I'll buy it for a nickel.
How do you factor those in to whatever the new normal is going to be, right? Because just for instance, I could pull up the Bird app on my phone, and I'm not going to find a Bird scooter around this neighborhood, but I can go to Beverly Hills or Glendale and find a zillion of them.
Not Beverly Hills, though.
Okay.
They banned them.
All right.
But yes, point taken.
Yeah. So what do you do about that, right? I mean, this is your job to figure this out.
It is. So we had in Los Angeles actually the largest micromobility pilot in the nation. And we've just passed our year 2 regulations, where now we've actually instituted a requirement that if you want to be in the trip-rich areas of this town, you must also be in the neighborhoods, usually that are just adjacent to them, that are low-income neighborhoods that typically don't get investment by the private sector unless the public sector intervenes.
Yeah.
And then it's not just Bird and Lime you could call up on your phone right now. It's also Amazon,
Sure.
food delivery, goods delivery. Every single one of those apps rests on this idea that we should all just be optimizing for our own individual desires and efficiency. When you watch that little car move towards you in the city, it looks like the city is blissfully free of traffic. But what's actually happening is the tragedy of the commons, where everybody is optimizing for themselves, and we as a collective, we lose.
All right, so let's get back to where we started then as we wrap this thing up. The guy playing basketball on your project over there, right?
Yes.
And let's use him as the archetype for all Angelinos who are hustling and bustling and got to get where they got to go.
Right.
How do you make people pay attention to this systemic stuff that you live and breathe?
Well, one of the things I think that probably intrigued that he liked, the first thing he said actually when I walked over there was, yeah, this art is really cool. This is the creative capital of the world. We have artists and storytellers here who can use art in the street to startle people out of their day-to-day. I mean, one of the biggest stories, I think, in transportation at least, during the Black Lives Matter movement, has been cities putting large murals in the street.
Literally, street art on the streets.
Literally in the street. I mean, you want to talk about a transformative sort of approach to get people to think differently about what a street is for. And then we just have to keep being in community and working with people who are the experts on their streets, the people who live and breathe them every day, and ask them what they need.
Salita, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This final note on the way out today, it's a number, it's a news item, and it's an observation. The number is 64.7 million. That's from Nielsen, the ratings people, their preliminary report on how many of us watched across 8 broadcast and cable channels, in other words, television only. How many of us watched what was billed as a presidential debate last night, but really wasn't? The news item is that the Bipartisan Commission on Presidential Debates apparently agrees and is going to put new rules into effect for the next one in a couple of weeks, including CBS News reports cutting off a candidate's microphone if necessary. The observation is this: that was just depressing.
Marketplace is supported by Mimecast, offering cloud email security. Mimecast is dedicated to protecting companies from spam, phishing, and other email-based cyber threats. More at Mimecast.com. Relentless protection, resilient world. And by C3.ai. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai. And by Baird. As clients focus on the challenges stemming from COVID-19, Baird remains committed to their financial interests, as they have for 100 years. More information at rwbaird.com.
All right, here's your midweek moment of economic context on the way out. It was actually yesterday, but I missed it. Real estate continues to boom in this era of bargain basement interest rates. The S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller National Home Price Index, yes, it's a mouthful, but it is kind of the gold standard. Anyway, it shows average home prices in big cities across the country rose 4.8% for the year ending July. Our media production team: Robin Edgar, Drew Jostad, Jeff Peters, Daniel Ramirez, Jay Siebold, Charlton Thorpe, Ben Tolliday, and Becca Weinman. They're going to the studio, so the rest of us don't have to unless your home internet is bad. I'm Kai Ryssdal, and this is APM.
WNYC.